While I understand the urgency, the temporary ban challenges the foundations of our Constitution, but most importantly, it is unconstitutional. My oath was to protect the Constitution, and that is what I will do.
That is the New Mexico sheriff pushing back against the New Mexico governor about a public health order that she ordered over the weekend, saying that you cannot carry a firearm in public in parts of New Mexico, particularly Albuquerque, for the next 30 days. Well, it faces several lawsuits, and you've got pushback even from Democrats. Welcome back. Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY. Springfield's News and Talk. Of course, we look a lot at Illinois in particular when it comes to firearms and the Second Amendment and whether or not state laws and policies are violating those Second Amendment rights. We've been tracking lawsuits here in Illinois where we're still waiting for any kind of resolution out of the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeal challenging Illinois' gun and magazine ban that was passed by law earlier this year. So that's still pending in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. Next month, October 11th, down in the Southern District, a challenge of that law on the issue of vagueness will be heard in a federal court. So that's kind of where we're at in the various lawsuits there are challenging Illinois' gun and magazine ban, and the registry that is set to open up in about 2 weeks' time, setting up for that January 1st deadline to file an affidavit with Illinois State Police or face criminal penalties. So that's what's happening in Illinois. But over the weekend, a lot of focus has been on New Mexico, especially with the governor there issuing a public health order that essentially says for the next 30 days, you cannot carry a firearm in public places, despite open carry, despite concealed carry in New Mexico. This is something that Governor Michelle Grisham announced on Friday. But you had the Bernalillo County District Attorney and the sheriff, Democratic Party leader as well, with the state's attorney there, joining the mayor and the police chief saying they wouldn't enforce it. But you also have the sheriff, John Allen, saying that as well. They will not be enforcing this public health order. Here is the sheriff of Bernalillo County in New Mexico, again, reiterating why he's not going to enforce this. And in particular, some anecdotes as to not just the unconstitutional nature, but just the common sense nature of this order. Again, here's the sheriff.
While I understand the urgency, the temporary ban challenges the foundations of our Constitution, but most importantly, it is unconstitutional. My oath was to protect the Constitution, and that is what I will do. The governor made it clear in her press conference. She knew we as law enforcement did not agree with the order, and as a result, this was solely her decision. Other than this ban being unconstitutional, here are other reasons why I will not enforce the order. One, what many forget, is I have enough violence here in Bernalillo County. I do not want to have political violence towards my deputies or here in Bernalillo County. My job is to keep the peace and to make sure that the citizens of Bernalillo County are safe, and I do not believe that this order will help me do so. I'm a law enforcement professional. This order will not do anything to curb gun violence other than punish law-abiding citizens from their constitutional right to self-defense. Let me give you a personal story. Last week, as I'm sitting here as the sitting sheriff, I get a phone call that my brother also was a victim of gun violence last week that many of you do not know. While he and my nephew were sitting in their car, they were shot at and their vehicle was impacted by numerous rounds. How can I, as a sheriff, tell him to put his firearms away and not be able to protect himself? I have a fact for you. Criminals do not follow the law or a public health order. Never seen it, we will never see criminals follow the law. Once again, this only punishes law-abiding citizens.
So that is the Bernalillo County Sheriff John Allen during a news conference yesterday saying they're not going to enforce this. It's unconstitutional. It's something that they can't stand by, and you got lawsuits that are stacking up. And one thing that's clear is even the New Mexico governor acknowledged on Friday that criminals are not going to be following this. But she says it sends a resounding message. Again, let's go ahead and hear some of what she had to say on Friday when announcing this public health order.
Yeah. But your point is valid.
You took an oath to the Constitution. Isn't it unconstitutional to say you cannot exercise your carry license?
With one exception, and that is if there's an emergency, and I've declared an emergency for a temporary amount of time, I can invoke additional powers. No constitutional right, in my view, including my oath, is intended to be absolute. There are restrictions on free speech. There are restrictions on my freedoms. In this emergency, this 11-year-old and all these parents who have lost all these children, they deserve my attention to have the debate about whether or not in an emergency we can create a safer environment. Because what about their constitutional rights? I took an oath to uphold those too. And if we ignore this growing problem without being bold, I've said to every other New Mexican, your rights are subrogated to theirs. And they are not, in my view.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
You're talking about crimes. There are already laws against the crimes, so how are their rights?
I got it. But again, if I'm unsafe, who's standing up for that right? If this climate is so out of control, somebody should do something. I'm doing as much as I know to do.
Madam Governor,
Yep.
do you really think that criminals are going to hear this message and not carry a gun in Albuquerque on the streets for 30 days?
No. But here's what I do think. It's a pretty resounding message.
So again, the New Mexico governor saying that it's a resounding message, even though she doesn't think that the criminals are actually going to comply with this public health order. Of course, this led to a lawsuit being filed by several organizations. In particular, you've got the National Association for Gun Rights. They filed that lawsuit against Michelle Lejean Grisham over her executive order. And if we look at the docket here of that particular case, you've got the order being asked for yesterday and Monday. And then as it plays out, you've got a district judge being assigned, David Uris. Also, you've got the statements being filed by the various plaintiffs. Then the complaints being filed as well. So what happened on Monday is you've got the minutes, the order vacating and hearing of temporary restraining order set for 9/12. The hearing will be reset at a later date, so it's been delayed. All right, so this case again being filed on the 9th, and you've got all the statements, you got the judge being assigned, but then the issue of a temporary restraining order, that hearing was set for today. But it has now been reset for a later date. So we'll see what happens with this particular case as that plays out in New Mexico. But again, you've got the situation here in Illinois as we continue to wait for the outcome of the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals on a state law, not an executive order, a state law that bans the sale and possession of certain semi-automatic firearms and magazines. And also that registry that's supposed to take effect October 1st with the deadline of January 1st to file. So lawsuits stacking up all over the place. You got executive orders, some saying that this signals what some gun control advocates would advocate for is a public health order, declaring that public health demands that you can't carry firearms, despite the Second Amendment rights of individuals being able to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So even in New Mexico, they've got Republicans drafting impeachment orders. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And even the ACLU voiced objections, saying that this kind of approach leads to the over-policing of our communities, racial profiling, and increased misery in the lives of already marginalized people. So I'm curious if the ACLU has similar sentiments about the gun and magazine ban here in Illinois. When I've asked the ACLU of Illinois in the past about gun legislation, not the gun ban in particular, but they've declined to comment, not wanting to take a position. So interesting to see that as well. But we'll, of course, track all of this for you. You can follow me anywhere, Bishop On Air. Just search X, formerly known as Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. Again, Bishop On Air. If you've got a tip or something you want to share, you can email me, bishoponair@gmail.com. All right, stay tuned. We'll tell you about the latest out of Highland Park, where the suspect of that Independence Day shooting and looking at a trial date set to begin when. We'll get the latest there. Also in Springfield, local arrests producing several firearms that considered part of this assault weapons ban, so we'll touch on that. One thing used as the impetus for Illinois' gun and magazine ban and the registry is the shooting in Highland Park, where a suspect fired upon a Independence Day parade in 2022. So that, of course, is a case that continues with the suspect and the person alleged to have committed this crime, Robert Cremo III. A judge has set a date in December for the alleged Highland Park shooter's trial. So this, of course, happening yesterday in court. It was only a 3-minute hearing, according to the Chicago Tribune, but they went ahead and set for a trial date in December as that case continues. And just a reminder of this case, ultimately what you had was in 2019, and I'm curious if this is going to come up during the trial, that local police were responding to multiple calls at the individual's home for suicidal ideation. He had wanted to harm himself. Police show up, take some knives away. He, at a separate time, was alleging to harm family. Police show up. They issue a note to Illinois State Police that this individual is a clear and present danger. Illinois State Police received that, but regardless of having that note, Illinois State Police issued a firearm owner identification card to Cremo III when he was 19 years old in 2019, late at the request of his father, Robert Cremo Jr. So Cremo Jr. giving the go-ahead and the green light for his 19-year-old son to get a firearm owner identification card despite a clear and present danger report being filed by local law enforcement to Illinois State Police. So you've actually got not just Cremo III, who's alleged to have shot up that Independence Day parade, 7 people murdered there, and he faces 7 counts plus more, but you've also got Robert Cremo Jr., the father, scheduled for a trial in November on reckless conduct charges for approving this firearm owner's identification card. So again, interesting case and something I think will be watched closely, especially because it was the impetus for Illinois' gun and magazine ban. But another issue concerning firearms, definitely wanted to highlight this in Springfield. You've got local police making an arrest. Here's the announcement. They sent out yesterday, September 9th, at approximately 8:42, Springfield Police Street Crimes Unit and numerous patrol officers executed a search warrant in Springfield. Officers had been made aware of this residence after a dog was reportedly stolen by several people, one of which was armed with a firearm. Prior to the search warrant being served on subjects that was apprehended outside of the front porch area, the rest of the occupants of the house were detained without incident. 7 guns, including an AK-47 pistol with a drum magazine and a semi-automatic rifle with a drum magazine, were recovered from the residence. So you've got the multiple Springfield officers detaining the individuals on September 10th. As officers were patrolling a crowd, they observed a male and also appeared nervous and walked away. And the officers, as they walked closer to the individual, that individual walking away. So you've got that narrative there. All arrests are in custody of the Sangamon County Jail awaiting formal charges. So we'll see what the charges ultimately are. But you've got booking photos and you've got the photos of the firearms as well. So let's take a look at some of those with... looks like, an AK-47 with a drum magazine, a revolver, a short-barreled shotgun, a semi-automatic rifle, several handguns with extended magazines and a drum magazine there as well. So yeah, it's kind of fascinating to see just the extent of this particular arrest with these firearms that Springfield police were able to take up. So let's look at some of the individuals charged here. Of course, Springfield Police Department making these arrests. You've got several individuals in custody being near or in possession of these firearms. So you've got 4 individuals arrested with several firearms taken into custody. Formal charges are pending. So, just the grand scope of things, right? New Mexico's governor, somebody kills a child, which is absolutely horrific. But yet in New Mexico, you've got that incident. Up in Chicago, how many headlines have we seen of young people being killed by violent crime? So you've got that playing out in Chicago and elsewhere. But in New Mexico, with that order to prohibit the possession of firearms out in the public, despite having a concealed carry license or despite open carry laws in New Mexico, that's being challenged in the courts. In Illinois, you've got the challenge of the gun and magazine ban pending in the 7th Circuit with a hearing October 11th down in the Southern District. And you've also got the impetus of the Illinois gun and magazine ban being the Highland Park parade shooting, with that trial set for December, with the FOID card issues, evidence in the case against the father of the Highland Park shooting. And then you've also got in Springfield, a different tact, right? Firearms being taken off the streets, criminals being arrested with pending charges on all of that. So just an overview here to start the morning on a Tuesday with Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News.